The Delta variant is much more transmissible, and so airborne transmission in small spaces is more predominant.
Tonight, breaking news, New South Wales continues to see a rise in COVID cases as fears grow that Greater Sydney's lockdown will again be extended for months. Authorities now claiming dead on arrival bodies are being presented by family members at hospitals. It's Sunday, the 1st of August. You're watching 6 News also tonight.
Essentially, we come out of this lockdown. The 5 reasons to leave home, that's gone. The 10-kilometre limit, that's gone. 5-kilometre limit, sorry, that's gone. 2 hours, all of those rules are gone.
1 year on, sense of deja vu amongst many as Victorians enjoy newfound freedoms, but this time last year they were heading into a stage 4 lockdown. Our reporter will take a look back at how the situation was being reported on. And Sky News relaunches its regional channel overnight, while at the same time local news services continue to decrease. Plenty of mixed reaction to it online. We're getting to all that a little later. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for your company on the first day of a brand new month as Greater Sydney continues their lockdown amid another concerning rise in COVID-19 cases. It was this time last year that Victoria was heading into a stage 4 lockdown. We'd recorded 397 new cases. A total of 41 people were in ICU and 116 people had died, far less than the more than 800 who would die in the coming weeks and months. This is what we were reporting 365 days ago, that parts, if not all of Victoria, was about to go into stage 4 restrictions, that business owners were being notified, that the transport industry was preparing for a shutdown. For many people right now, though, there's an overwhelming sense of deja vu as case and death numbers continue to rise over the border in New South Wales. They, of course, have 2 extra factors. The Delta variant, which experts say is more contagious than the traditional coronavirus we all dealt with last year, and the vaccines, which are being rolled out across the country despite a slow start earlier this year. There have been a lot of major developments in the past 24 hours. Senior reporter Darby Travers begins our special coverage.
Just days after Victoria and South Australia left their lockdowns, millions of people in southeast Queensland have just entered their 5th. 11 local government areas entered a 3-day lockdown from 4 p.m. yesterday after 6 locally acquired COVID-19 cases were recorded, including the parents and 2 siblings of a 17-year-old high school student, all of which are infected with the deadly Delta variant. If you live in Brisbane, Ipswich, Logan, Redland, Moreton Bay, the Lockyer Valley, Noosa, Scenic Rim, Somerset, the Gold Coast or Sunshine Coast, you must stay at home and only leave for essential reasons. In announcing the lockdown, Deputy Premier Stephen Miles said the restrictions were the toughest the state has ever seen.
The only way to beat the Delta strain is to move quickly, to be fast and to be strong. That is now the nationally agreed approach. Just now, the Premier chaired our daily COVID meeting. We received the advice of the Chief Health Officer, and the Premier has ordered that we move strongly and implement all of the restrictions advised by the Chief Health Officer. These restrictions will apply to anyone who's been in those 11 LGAs from 1 a.m. this morning. So even if you are no longer in those 11 LGAs, if you were here at 1 a.m. this morning, these restrictions apply no matter where you are now. They will be in place until 4 p.m. on Tuesday, but of course that will be subject to events between now and then.
Interstate New South Wales COVID-19 cases continue to rise despite earlier hopes of a decrease from authorities. Yesterday, the CBD was fairly empty despite fears of another protest, with police patrolling the streets to ensure that didn't happen. The lockdown was extended to the end of this month, but it is feared we could see another extension that could go for weeks or potentially months.
The Prime Minister says COVID-19 lockdowns will end once 80% of eligible Australians are vaccinated against COVID-19. Scott Morrison has told reporters that the country will move into Phase 2 or Phase B of the 4-phase plan he announced last month, where case numbers will be less of a factor in determining whether a lockdown was necessary, the focus more being on hospitalisation and death rates. However, it's understood international arrivals will still be restricted in that phase, but we could see special rules for people fully vaccinated, the details of which have not yet been confirmed. Hundreds of soldiers from the ADF have undergone training to help New South Wales authorities crack down on Sydney residents disobeying the lockdown measures. From tomorrow, 300 troops will be door-knocking residents in an attempt to make sure everyone is following the rules, though they will not be carrying weapons while patrolling the streets. And despite criticism from many that it was unfairly targeting multicultural communities in southwest Sydney, Police Minister David Elliott says it's necessary because a small minority of people think the rules don't apply to them. New South Wales Health has confirmed that they are investigating 4 staff who may have attended last weekend's anti-lockdown protests. Despite the violent scenes, authorities have now confirmed no COVID-19 cases had been noted as attending the protest, though it is possible they could have lied about their presence. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian has reinforced the message that people should not be out and protesting, saying it's just going to prolong the pain for all of us, and potential protesters should not give their loved ones a death sentence. Well, as we mentioned a little earlier, it is 1 year since Stage 4 restrictions were introduced across Melbourne to help stop a rising number of coronavirus infections. Now, that was lockdown number 2, the only place in Australia at the time to have more than one. And as the state leaves its 5th lockdown, much shorter than its 2nd, the question has been raised, the short lockdowns even work? Reporter Lincoln Holmes has the story.
On this day 1 year ago, Melbourne was heading into Stage 4 lockdown. That was only supposed to be for 6 weeks, but it wouldn't end for months.
Tonight, Victoria's darkest day, the state records more than 700 cases and 13 deaths in less than 24 hours, with masks set to become mandatory for the entire state as the aged care crisis worsens.
At the time, 6 News was reporting on the rise of cases inside the aged care sector, with 397 reported on August 1st, bringing the total to just under 11,000.
Good evening. Victoria has recorded their darkest day in the coronavirus pandemic so far.
At that point, 116 people had died, far less than the more than 800 people who would pass away in the coming weeks and months. Victoria was the only state in Australia to have more than one lockdown. Remote learning was in full effect, and so were mask requirements. But let's fast forward to 2021. With parts of both New South Wales and Queensland under heavy restrictions, and 6 out of 8 states and territories being in lockdown since June, the question has to be raised, do short lockdowns even work? Epidemiologist Mary Louise McClaw spoke to us earlier this year to share her perspective.
They have learnt that you have to respond very, very rapidly because it takes off. You know, if that analogy doesn't work, then think of a bushfire. And, you know, you get to the size of a bushfire, and if the fire brigade haven't been called out, it's likely to become a fire front.
It's hoped the lockdowns will end for good once majority of the Australian population gets vaccinated. Lincoln Holmes, 6 News.
Overseas, the Centres for Disease Control and Prevention says vaccinated Americans should go back to wearing masks indoors as COVID-19 cases once again rise. Authorities now also recommending that students, teachers and staff at schools should wear masks regardless of their vaccination status. US President Joe Biden says his previous statement that people who have had both jabs need not to wear a mask indoors was true at the time, but doesn't apply today.
In May, you made it sound like a vaccine was the ticket to losing the mask forever. And
that is true at the time, because I thought there were people who were going to understand that getting vaccinated made a gigantic difference. And what happened was, a new variant came along, they didn't get vaccinated, it was spread more rapidly, and more people were getting sick. That's the difference.
On a state-by-state level, Atlanta, Georgia has brought back its mask mandate, Arkansas's governor has declared a public health emergency, and Florida has recorded its biggest one-day increase of case numbers since January, while hospitalisations nationally are now at the highest level since April. The man who oversaw the beginning of the pandemic, meanwhile, is back in the news. New release notes showing Donald Trump asked top Justice Department officials to declare the 2020 election corrupt in an apparent attempt to stop Joe Biden ever entering office. The former American president reportedly told officials that they have an obligation to tell people the election was illegal, despite repeatedly being told that allegations of voter fraud he made were false. US correspondent Jackson Gosnell has more.
Leo, we're learning more about former President Trump's last few weeks in office. The Deputy Attorney General who served to replace William Barr after he stepped down took notes during a call with former President Trump where the former president asked the Justice Department to declare that the 2020 election was corrupt. The Justice Department responded saying that they essentially weren't going to be doing that. It's not how elections work, and that they weren't really interested. So the former president, he accepted that, I guess, and then moved on from that, saying that he would just have to work with the Republican Party to get that message out. And himself, along with many other Republicans, do believe that the 2020 election was corrupt. They have millions of supporters who believe that as well. So we will see if those unsubstantiated claims so far turn up to be true. But of course, we are continuing to monitor any new evidence that comes about as a result of that. There's been audits in several states, along with different people coming forward to talk about their versions of what has happened. So we'll just have to see how that story continues to progress. But right now, no solid, hard, convicting evidence as of what's been turned in right now. So as we learn more information about this, we'll be sure to pass that along. But important to note before I go here, former President Trump just kind of had a legal defeat here. We do know that the IRS must give Congress former President Trump's tax returns from 2015 to 2020. And we do know that the former president did not want his tax returns to be handed over to anybody, really. So we'll have to see what comes of that. It's really unclear if the public would be made aware of what's in that, but we do know that the IRS must give Congress those tax returns. I'll continue to monitor the very latest from in the U.S. I'm Jackson Gosnell. Back to you.
A new poll suggests the Israeli public preferred Benjamin Netanyahu's handling of COVID-19 compared to the country's new president, Naftali Bennett. According to the Jerusalem Post, the Channel 12 poll found 43% preferred how Netanyahu dealt with the pandemic, 21% preferred Bennett, while the rest said neither, the same, or did not respond. On Twitter, Netanyahu, who is now the country's opposition leader, shared the image of the poll, simply saying, "Thank you." He was ousted as Israeli PM only a few weeks after heavy fighting between IDF forces and Hamas. A UN committee report looking into the situation on the ground in Afghanistan provides a compelling justification to ensure that the federal government heeds the warnings of advocates and moves swiftly to get locally engaged Afghan employees who worked for Australians away from the clutches of the Taliban. That's according to a new article from journalist Tom Ravlic in the Mandarin, who says it remains to be seen whether the bureaucracy's gears will move quickly enough to beat the Taliban's bullets. Earlier we caught up with him to discuss the situation.
Over the past few weeks, advocates for the various employees and guards of the Australian Embassy, the former Afghan employees and guards of the Australian Embassy, have been speaking out about the way in which the government is delaying the processing of their paperwork. The Taliban are gaining territory across Afghanistan, and people in Kabul, which is where the bulk of the various sort of interpreters and guards have reside, still are very, very nervous. Their cards are marked. They've worked with a Western country, and they're extremely concerned about how the government is moving towards some sort of solution in their situation. Kay Danes and Patrick Ryan are two humanitarian activists who are busy pulling together details and passing them on to the government. But it doesn't appear that the government is moving quickly enough it remains to be seen whether they're going to be able to extricate those individuals from Afghanistan before the Taliban overtakes or gets too close to Kabul.
The death toll from wildfires on Turkey's southern coast has once again risen as firefighters continue to battle the blazes for a fifth straight day. More than 70 fires have been broken out in the past few weeks, and a number are still burning as we go to air tonight. Planes from Russia, Ukraine and Azerbaijan have also all arrived to help the firefighting effort. Reuters reports villages and hotels have been evacuated in a number of tourist hotspots, while TV footage shows people fleeing from their homes across fields. The ABC's entire defence to Christian Porter's defamation trial will not be made public after a judge agreed 27 pages would stay looking like this, completely blacked out. The ex-Attorney General sued the national broadcaster over an article about a woman's claim he raped her decades ago, which he vigorously denies, but the recent developments have led to some claiming the public's right to know is being infringed upon, though Justice Jane Jaggett maintains that the decision was made to prevent prejudice to the proper administration of justice. Well, when you think of someone calling for a ban on cigarettes, you probably don't imagine that person to be the CEO of a tobacco firm, but that's exactly what Yester Olsak, the boss of Philip Morris International, has done, saying the sooner a ban happens, the better it is for everyone, adding they should be treated like petrol cars, which are due to be banned from 2030. His company recently announced that they wanted half its turnover to come from non-smoking products as it morphs into what they have described as a health and wellness company. Well, back home, meanwhile, Sky News has relaunched its regional TV channel overnight. The broadcaster has officially switched from the WIN network to Southern Cross Austereo, while at the same time, local news services across the country continue to decrease. There's concerns from some over the impact Sky's so-called after dark presenters may have on rural communities, but plenty of others say it's going to provide more diversity of opinion, with several shows that weren't seen via WIN set to make their free-to-air debut tomorrow. Reporter Dusty Fitzpatrick has the latest on the ground from Bathurst.
As local news services across regional Australia continue to disappear, one of the country's biggest pay TV channels just relaunched for millions of people.
Sky News on WIN.
Sky News Regional officially begun through the Southern Cross stereo at midnight, after 3 years with the WIN network that ended after they returned to their affiliation with Channel 9. While the programming remains relatively the same as what's seen via Foxtel, there are a few notable exceptions, including Fox Sports News replacing several news bulletins, and Sky News Breakfast being shown on weekdays instead of First Edition.
This will change everything. Can you believe it?
Isn't it amazing?
Reaction from the public has, however, been mixed. Some say it's important to have an alternative to networks like the ABC, which is perceived as left-wing by many conservatives, while others say Sky's presence will lead to radicalisation of people due to their so-called after-dark right-wing hosts. Former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, who's been calling for a royal commission into Murdoch Media, told the ABC in late June that he's not a fan.
The danger is not just now, and it's unfolding, I believe, beneath our feet. It's what it will become even by the next federal election, and certainly the one following that. By moving into the digital platforms and the cable platforms and the merging of the technologies and the dissemination of far-right extremist content, that we are now seeing, in my view, a radical and advancing cancer in our democracy, happening quietly beneath the surface now, and it will erupt, in my judgment, in a way in which will surprise mainstream political opinion.
The channel's relaunch comes weeks after Nine axed its 3 local news bulletins in Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland, and WIN TV merged 12 of their bulletins. Sky News Regional can be viewed on Channel 56 alongside Channel 10 and their multi-channels, while for viewers in South Australia, Griffith, Northern New South Wales and the Gold Coast, it will continue to be seen on Channel 53. In Bathurst, Dusty Fitzpatrick, 6 News.
A dog missing for 2 years has been reunited with its owner after being spotted on a TV news segment. Take a look at this. The Wisconsin Humane Society wrote on its Facebook page that the dog, Payday, was originally brought home as a companion for Dwight's now 12-year-old daughter, who was still distraught over the incredible loss of her best friend, Dwight being the person who saw the TV segment and then called into the station Fox 6 after watching the Adopt-a-Pup segment. They added that Dwight's mum, Melissa, came to pick up the beloved pup, as you can see here, and it was the most incredible reunion. And now is Ivan and Sarah with a look at what's coming up later tonight on WAMN News.
Thanks, Leo. Coming up on WAMN News, shocking statistics on Indigenous deaths on the streets are seeing advocates call for more housing for the vulnerable. A WAMN News exclusive.
Meanwhile, the family of homeless Indigenous woman Alana Gartlett wants answers about her death.
Yes or no, exclusive news poll shows whether viewers agree that all WA hospital workers should have mandatory vaccination.
And on Western Perspective, Maria Vucic's bid to be the Fremantle Mayor, plus Dr. Andrew Miller's comment. Join us tonight on the WAMN News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Right, thanks both Ivan and Sarah there. And Adam Ross forecast right across the country. Brisbane partly cloudy, a top of 21, 18 in Sydney, 10 degrees in the nation's capital Canberra, 16 in Melbourne, 12 in Hobart, cloudy and 16 as well in Adelaide, 24 in Alice Springs, 19 in Perth, and in Darwin a warm top of 33. And finally tonight, just a quick reminder to tune into Press Gallery this coming Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time for everything you need to know about this year's census, which is coming up on August the 10th. Now, we'll be speaking to Andrew Henderson from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, as well as answering your questions you may have about the census, as well as questions you have about the questions on the census. Speaking of questions, I know I've said that word a few too many times in the last 10 seconds, our Q&A has been pushed back a week, so you can have more questions put into our Google form. Again, the link to that Google form is on our website. Again, you can just ask anything you want about the past, present and future of 6 News, not just myself. Press Gallery again coming up 8 a.m. Eastern Time Thursday morning. And that is 6 News for this Sunday evening. You can stay up to date with the latest headlines by heading to our website 6newsau.com and by following us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok and Lit. Just search 6 News AU to find us. I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Thanks for your company. Good night.